the Prelude in F sharp minor from the second book is one that shows what a fabulous melodist Bach is. And we don't always think of Bach that way. Though, I mean, he has written melodies that everybody remembers, even things like... I mean, there are plenty of melodies that are memorable, but because we tend to think of Bach as a polyphonist, we don't necessarily associate him with that gift that he possessed to the highest degree. And this is an interesting example. It's very much a continuous melodic flow. And the reason Bach is a nightmare for a singer, or indeed for any wind instrument, is that his melodies seems to invent themselves as they go on, but they have very little in terms of cadential points where we stop and we start something else. They are very much continuous development. In some ways, oddly enough, a little bit like a Sibelius symphony, where the form seems to discover itself as it goes. Well, Bach melodies have that quality that they are in some ways totally unpredictable. And he, in a situation like that, he does have sort of melodic fragments that are going to be anchor points and to happen time and time again. A lot of it in between has the feeling of an improvisation. I'll just play this beginning. And it goes on and on and on. And yes, you do recognize that comes again. You do have this... so you do have those elements. The piece is built on those, but in a way that is extremely free in its construction. It is written as a trio, so it's a strict three-part, well, almost perfectly strict three-part. When Bach writes at three, it is interesting because there are different case scenarios. There are cases where the three parts are really equal in material, and you should not in some ways put any spotlight on any given voice, because they are all going to play roughly equal parts. That would have been, for example, very much the case of the C sharp minor from this book, and will be the case of the B flat minor, which is perhaps the best piece written in that style, of strict three voices going through. There are cases, and in that I would put a piece like the Italian Concerto, which is very similar in style to this piece. Again, free-flowing right hand. Where it's utterly non-ambiguous. The bass line is accompanying, the middle voice is accompanying the bass line, and the top is what is important. This prelude falls somewhere in between. It's made clear from the second bar, because if you... So in the second bar already you have an imitation of the... However, it peters out rapidly, and you come to realize that those two lower and middle voices are in a sort of neither quite foreground nor quite background as well. They have a bit more life than the Italian Concerto, which is simply doing that. And yet they are not strong enough in some ways to detract from the main voice, which is really what the ear is drawn towards. So they do create interesting little things, but they are not organized in a way that is that qualifies them fully as independent voices. I mean, anywhere I turn, so they have a semi-life as independent voices. So it's a grey area that makes this prelude stand apart in between a little bit. The fugue is, although it has only 3 voices, it is a weighty sort of piece. Also because it has 3 subjects. The first one. Subject, but then you have a second, much shorter, that arrives later on. And then again later on you have a third subject. And of course, what would be the fun of having 3 subjects if you don't combine them? And that's exactly what Bach does, and fairly early on, actually. He sort of mixes them both together. The best example arrives right at the end, where you really have the 3 in a quite condensed. So. That shows how much he must have thought and planned so that they would be able to match. Incidentally, the third subject is exactly the same than the third subject of the C sharp minor from the first book. Exactly the same, and in fact I play those 2 fugues in a roughly similar mood and speed, although I think the C sharp minor has something a little bit more stark about it. I'm interested and rather puzzled to see that there seems to be a common interpretative trend for that fugue, which is to make it almost bouncy. I mean, I really have heard it many times. Now, Bach being the very strange phenomenon that he is, a lot of different approaches can work, and if that is done well, to a certain extent it will work. And I cannot guarantee 100% that this is not what Bach meant, but it puzzles me exceedingly, because everything for me in the writing, in the choice of the key, in the choice of the subject, everything suggests something much more serious, deep, than something bouncy. And yet I've heard it too many times for it to be just a coincidence. So unless pianists are simply copying each other without giving it any thought, which I wouldn't want to think, it appears genuinely possible to envisage the piece in that way. That is not what I do.